She's just a nobody. I heard my daughter-in-law say that, right in the middle of a multi-million-dollar wedding. At that exact moment, my wife was sitting alone in the very last row. No one reacted. No one turned around. Kevin, my own son, even gave a small nod, like it made perfect sense. The irony. The woman they called a nobody was the one who had written speeches that made this entire country rise to its feet and applaud. And that night, everything began to change. Before I go on, if you believe a person's worth can't be measured by appearances, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I read every single message. Now, let me tell you what really happened that afternoon. No one in that room knew. I had heard everything. I stayed still, both hands resting on my knees. I looked toward the stage where crystal lights spilled down onto the marble floor of a five-star resort in Monterey. Beyond the wide glass windows, the ocean stretched out, blue and calm, a perfect setting for a perfect wedding. Except, my family was no longer part of that picture. Megan sat 2 rows away from me. She chose that seat because she didn't want to draw attention. She's always been that way. The cream silk dress she wore had been pressed early that morning. Not designer, no logo, no glittering stones. Just neat, clean. For me, that was enough. For Nancy, it wasn't. I watched Nancy lean toward her close friends. They laughed softly. Champagne glasses lifted to eye level. One of them turned to look at Megan. Her eyes moved slowly, from Megan's silver hair pinned carefully in place, down to the low heels, worn smooth by the years. Then they laughed again. Kevin stood nearby. His custom tuxedo fit sharp across his shoulders. My son looked like the kind of man you see on the cover of a financial magazine. Straight posture, confident smile, trained to walk into rooms where a man's worth is measured by balance sheets. He didn't look at his mother. 2 months earlier, Kevin had called me. His voice lowered, like he was negotiating a deal. Dad, there'll be a lot of Nancy's family partners at the wedding. Investors. A few influential people. You and Mom can just sit in the audience. No speeches. I want everything to feel polished. Polished. I understood. Don't let our working class past step into the future he was trying to paint. Don't let a carpenter's rough hands distract men who glance at expensive watches. I agreed. Not because I felt small, but because, on your son's wedding day, you step aside. Megan agreed too. As long as Kevin is happy, she said. She's been saying that for years. This wedding wasn't just a ceremony. It was a statement. Nancy's family belonged to what people call the new upper class. They didn't inherit generations of prestige, but they had money, and they knew how to make sure everyone saw it. Long tables covered in white linen, each place setting printed with the guest's name in gold ink, wine selected from a private cellar, a string quartet playing soft classical music, gentle enough for conversation without raised voices. I overheard guests discussing investment funds, coastal real estate markets, upcoming mergers. No one talked about family. No one mentioned the groom's childhood, maybe because they didn't know it. I looked at Megan again. She wasn't bowing her head. She was simply observing, calm as when she reads through a manuscript hundreds of pages long. I know that look. It isn't weakness, it's restraint. Nancy stepped onto the stage to test the microphone before the ceremony. She cracked a few jokes to warm up the crowd. People laughed. Kevin looked at her with pride. Then I heard it again. She's just a nobody. This time, not whispered, clearer. A few guests laughed along. Not because they understood who Megan was, but because they wanted to blend into the sound. There's something strange about rooms like that. When someone is diminished, people don't protest. They stay quiet to protect their place. I felt something inside my chest close. Not anger exploding. I'm too old for reckless reactions. It was quieter than that, like a door gently shutting when you realize you no longer belong. Kevin still didn't look at us. I wondered, when did he begin to feel embarrassed by us? Was it the year he entered private school where tuition for 1 year equaled the value of a house I built in 6 months? Was it when he met Nancy, who spoke about class, as if it were something you could purchase? Or maybe it started earlier. Megan once told me children raised in different environments learn to redefine their origins. She said it without blame. Just an observation. I don't know if Kevin truly believed his mother was a nobody, but that night, he didn't object. And sometimes, silence speaks louder than words. The ceremony was about to begin. Event staff signaled everyone to settle. The lights dimmed. The music shifted. Deeper now. Megan adjusted the fold of her dress, then gently placed her hand over mine as I sat beside her. Her hand was still warm. "Don't say anything," she whispered, "just for me. Today is Kevin's day." I nodded. But inside, a question began to form. Slowly, clearly. If today was Kevin's day, then who were we in this story? Just shadows at the back of the hall? Or something else? Something the people in this glittering room had never truly seen? I didn't know then that only a few. Hours later, the very people laughing would be the first to pick up their phones and reconsider the woman sitting beside me. But in that moment, all I saw was my wife called a nobody, sitting in a room full of people who were certain they understood the value of a human being. When the music began, and everyone rose to their feet, I stopped looking at the stage. I looked at Megan's hand resting on mine. That hand once held a hammer beside me, driving nails as we rebuilt our first house. And that same hand typed millions of words in a damp basement no one in this room has ever stepped into. Maybe I should tell you about that. Years ago, when we still lived in Savannah, Kevin was 10, bright kid. His teachers said he needed a better environment. Private school. The tuition cost several times what a carpenter earned. I was ready to say no. I told Megan we didn't have to prove anything to anyone. That night, she carried an old typewriter down to the basement. A friend had given it to her. She placed it on the wooden desk I built with my own hands. "I'll write," she said. Simple as that. I knew she had studied literature. I knew she could write. I just didn't know how good she really was. In the months that followed, the basement was the last room in the house with the light on. I'd wake up at 2, sometimes 3 in the morning, and see the glow slipping under the door. Steady typing. Not fast. Not frantic. Just persistent. Megan didn't write novels under her own name. She didn't sign book covers. Her work was behind the curtain. Politicians who needed speeches powerful enough to silence a crowd. Business leaders who wanted memoirs that sounded honest while smoothing over the gaps. Public figures facing crises, searching for careful words. Megan wrote for them. In return, she signed strict confidentiality agreements. No revealing names, no claiming credit, just payment. I once asked if it hurt, watching someone else stand on stage and accept awards for words she had written. She said, "We need Kevin's tuition." That was enough. There were years she worked 16 hours a day. Family in the daytime, writing at night. I've seen her fall asleep at the keyboard. Her shoulder tilted to one side. I'd place a blanket over her and turn off a few lights. Kevin never knew all of it. He knew Mom freelanced. He knew tuition was always paid on time. He knew every summer he went to camp with kids whose parents were lawyers, doctors, business owners. He didn't know how many sleepless nights paid for each check. When Kevin entered college, then earned his degree in finance, he began talking about networks, about status, about background, words that sounded foreign in our small kitchen. I didn't blame him. New environments teach new standards. But I noticed he mentioned his mother less and less around friends. If someone asked, he'd say, "My mom does some random writing." Random. I've watched manuscripts Megan finished delivered to the office of a well-known United States senator. I've seen on television an entire hall rise in applause. After a speech I recognized line by line, typed in our basement. I said nothing. Megan said nothing. She told me, "Don't let Kevin feel like he owes us. Maybe we were too careful, too quiet." When Kevin started dating Nancy, the change grew clearer. Nancy came from a newly wealthy family. They spoke of success like a trophy that had to be displayed. They asked me where I was investing. They asked Megan if she had formal credentials. Megan would just smile softly. No explanations. No defense. Once I overheard Nancy telling Kevin that family image was crucial if he wanted to go far in finance. I don't know what else was said behind closed doors. But after that, Kevin began suggesting we dress more appropriately when meeting his friends. I looked at my hands. The small scars from years of work don't disappear just because you wear a new shirt. Today's wedding is the peak of all that. A redefinition. Kevin isn't just marrying Nancy. He's stepping fully into her world. And in that world, Megan doesn't seem to have a place. I looked toward the stage as Nancy walked in wearing a custom white gown. Applause rose in steady waves. Cameras moved across the guests' faces. Megan sat straight. Her eyes were no longer on Kevin. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that once crafted speeches that shook halls far larger than this one. I wondered, if the people in this room knew who was sitting in the last row, would they see her differently? Or would they only see the simple dress and draw the same conclusion Nancy had? I didn't have an answer. Before the main ceremony began, Nancy stepped off the stage during a short break. She moved through the guest area, eyes scanning details, as if checking for anything out of place. Her gaze stopped at Megan's neckline. I know that look. It doesn't seek understanding. It measures. And I had a feeling what was about to happen wouldn't end with a quiet laugh. Nancy's eyes lingered at Megan's neck, longer than politeness allows. I followed her gaze. Megan was wearing a simple pearl necklace. The pearls weren't large. The shine was soft. Nothing flashy. If you didn't look closely, you'd think it was just an old piece, kept out of habit more than value. But I knew exactly where it came from. Years ago, after a private engagement in Washington, a woman who once lived in the White House held Megan's hand and said, "You helped me find the right words when I had none left." A few weeks later, a small velvet box arrived at our home. No press, no announcement, just a quiet thank you from a former First Lady of the United States. Megan never showed it off. She wore it only on important family occasions. Today was one of them. Nancy approached. Her sharp perfume arrived a step before she did. She leaned down, studying the necklace, like she was inspecting something misplaced. "You're wearing that?" she asked. Not loud, but loud enough for her friends to hear. Megan smiled gently. "Yes, I've had it for a long time." Nancy let out a small laugh. "I just think everything here should be cohesive. This is a major event. If the press takes photos and sees something inappropriate, it wouldn't look good." A few nearby guests began paying attention. I saw Kevin standing not far away, speaking with a middle-aged man in an expensive suit. He glanced toward us, then looked away. Nancy didn't wait. She reached out and touched the pearls, like they were hers to manage. "It's probably best not to wear costume jewelry in a setting like this," she said, her tone still dressed as helpful. My body went rigid. Before I could move, Nancy unclasped the necklace from Megan's neck. "Quick!" Certain. The pearls brushed against each other with a dry, brittle sound. Then right in front of us, she stepped aside, lifted the lid of a polished metal trash bin near the bar, and dropped the necklace inside. The sound when it hit the bottom wasn't loud, but to me, it echoed like a door slamming shut. No one shouted. No one stepped in. A few exchanged looks, then quickly turned away. In rooms like this, people avoid anything that might cost them their position. I stood up. Megan caught my hand. Her grip wasn't strong, but it held me in place. "Don't," she said softly. "Not today." I looked into her eyes. No tears, just a deep quiet, like when she finishes reading a manuscript and decides no more edits are needed. Nancy turned back, adjusting her hair, as if she'd just fixed a minor detail in the event plan. "I just want everything to be perfect," she said to her friends, loud enough for others to hear. "Perfect." I sat down again, but something inside me had shifted. This wasn't personal hurt anymore. A line had been crossed. At that moment, near the main entrance of the resort, there was a subtle movement I almost missed. A few men and women walked in, not with Nancy's friends, not with her family. They weren't loud. They didn't draw attention. But the way the reception staff hurried toward them, the way a senior manager personally came out to greet them, told me they weren't ordinary guests. One silver-haired man wore a simple suit perfectly tailored. Beside him, a middle-aged woman carried a leather document case. They didn't move toward the stage. They didn't admire the flowers or the music. Their eyes scanned the rows of seats, then stopped. On Megan, I saw recognition cross the man's face, not the look of a fan, the look of someone who knew exactly who he was searching for. He said something to the woman beside him. She nodded. Meanwhile, Nancy had returned to her place preparing for the main ceremony. Kevin held her hand, smiling for the cameras. No one on that stage knew that in the back of the hall, a pearl necklace lay in the trash, and another truth was quietly walking toward the center of this room. I looked at Megan. She sat straight, her neck now bare, her eyes forward, as if what had just happened was a small, forgettable detail. But I know my wife. When Megan chooses silence, it isn't weakness. It means she's waiting for the right moment. And for the first time that afternoon, I didn't just feel insulted. I felt something else. A quiet certainty that this room was about to face a truth it wasn't prepared for. I'm not a man who believes in destiny, but I do believe in timing. When the official ceremony began, everyone stood once more. Nancy and Kevin exchanged vows against the sea and sky of Monterey. Their voices carried through a sound system tuned to perfection. At the back of the hall, the silver-haired man I had noticed earlier remained still. He didn't clap when others did. He simply watched. The ceremony ended. The music shifted. Guests flowed toward the reception area. Glasses lifted. Conversations grew louder. I leaned toward Megan. "Wait here a moment," I said softly. She looked at me. She knew exactly what I was about to do. This time, she didn't stop me. I walked to the polished metal trash bin. No rush. No glance around to see who was watching. I lifted the lid, reached inside, and took back the pearl necklace. The small group nearby fell quiet. No one spoke. But they watched. I used my handkerchief to wipe each pearl gently, as if brushing away dust from time itself, not the insult from moments ago. Then I returned to Megan. As I bent down to fasten the necklace around her neck again, something else began to move across the room. The silver-haired man started walking toward us. Kevin was raising a toast with Nancy's family. Nancy laughed loudly, telling a story about building a personal brand. Everything still followed the script they had planned, until one of Nancy's friends pulled out her phone. She was an intern at a major newspaper in New York City. Earlier, I'd overheard her brag about an article published that morning. When her eyes drifted toward Megan, I saw a pause. She tilted her head, looked closer, then looked back at her screen. Her finger moved quickly, scrolling, opening an article, enlarging a photograph. Her expression changed slowly. Curiosity, doubt, then something like disbelief. She handed the phone to the person beside her. Within seconds, 2 more people were staring at the same screen. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard one word: impossible. Kevin noticed the small disturbance. He stepped closer, frowning. Nancy followed, annoyed that attention had shifted away from her. Then Kevin took the phone. My son, who could control his expression in shareholder meetings without blinking, suddenly looked blank. I knew exactly what they were seeing. That morning, a major paper had published an investigative feature on the most influential ghostwriters in America. The headline didn't mention names at first, but halfway through the article, there was a photograph from a private working session in Washington years ago. In the image, Megan stood beside several senior figures of the United States. Not center stage, but clear enough to recognize. The subheading read, "The woman shaping the words of those who shape the nation." I saw that article in our hotel room earlier that morning. I asked Megan if she wanted to leave before the ceremony began. She shook her head. Today is Kevin's day. Now, the article was passing from hand to hand, like a quiet current moving through the room. Nancy took the phone. She read quickly, then again. Her eyes moved from the screen to Megan and back. An older guest stepped toward Kevin. He looked at Megan longer than before, then gave a small, respectful nod. The shift in the air wasn't loud. It wasn't scandal. It felt more like a room realizing it had misjudged something important. By then, the silver-haired man stood before us. He smiled at Megan, not a polite smile. "I've been looking for you all afternoon," he said quietly. "We need to discuss the new project." He didn't have to explain more. Megan understood. I straightened my back. No raised voice. No accusation. I looked toward Nancy and Kevin, still standing among their whispering circle. "My daughter-in-law was partly right," I said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Megan is a nobody, to people who only look at the surface." I fastened the pearls around my wife's neck. They rested there, as if they had never left. But to those who know how to read, I continued, "She has never been a nobody." No applause followed. No cheers. Just another silence, heavier this time. deeper. And for the first time that afternoon, Kevin didn't look past us. He looked straight at his mother. I had never seen that look on my son's face before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't embarrassment in the way a man fears being judged. It was recognition, late recognition, like someone who finishes a page and suddenly realizes he misunderstood every chapter before it. Nancy broke the silence first. This article, there must be some mistake, she said, still trying to sound composed. There's so much inaccurate information online these days. But the silver-haired man beside us turned to her. His expression wasn't harsh, just certain. There's no mistake, he said. We've worked with her for over 20 years. The way he said, we changed the room. A few guests stepped closer, no longer keeping their polite distance. The woman with the document case opened her phone and showed more images to someone in Nancy's circle. Private meetings, behind-the-scenes moments. Megan seated at tables with people the press was only allowed to photograph from afar. I didn't feel triumph. I simply observed. Nancy wasn't smiling anymore. Kevin remained silent. He looked at his mother like he was trying to merge two images, the woman in our small kitchen in Savannah, and the woman powerful figures were now seeking out in a luxury resort overlooking Monterey. Megan didn't stand to receive congratulations. She didn't offer explanations. She simply nodded to the silver-haired man. Not today, she said softly. Today is my son's day. That nearly closed my throat. A few important guests left Nancy's family table and approached us. They shook Megan's hand. They called her by name. Not old woman, not the groom's mother. They spoke of past projects, speeches that shifted national debates, memoirs that restored reputations after crises. I could see it affecting Kevin more than any lecture I could have given. He had always believed networks were the key to success. And now he realized the deepest network in that room didn't belong to Nancy's family. It belonged to his mother. Nancy tried to smile as a few guests drifted away from the main table. She whispered something quickly to Kevin. I couldn't hear it, but I saw the tension in her jaw. I stepped toward my son. Kevin, I said, calm, the same tone I once used, teaching him how to hold a hammer. Today you're marrying your wife. I don't want to overshadow that. He looked at me, then at Megan. I didn't know, he said quietly. Of course you didn't, Megan replied, her voice still gentle. I never told you. There was no blame in it. Just truth laid on the table. Light, clear. Nancy finally approached us. She opened her mouth as if to apologize, then hesitated. Maybe for the first time in her life she understood that not all value comes with a visible label. Megan looked at her, not cold, not warm, just steady. You don't need to apologize, she said. Just remember, not everyone who is quiet has nothing to say. The tension softened. The quartet resumed playing. Servers carried out the main course, as if the schedule had never shifted. I looked at Megan. I knew she was tired. Let's go, I said. Kevin heard me. Stay a little longer, he said. I want to introduce Mom to a few people. Megan shook her head gently. You have your life, she said. Build it with your own ability. It wasn't refusal. It was responsibility handed back to him. We walked out as the sun lowered over the Pacific. No one stopped us. A few nodded respectfully. The silver-haired man said he would be in touch. Outside, the ocean breeze felt cooler than I expected. I took a long breath. You okay? I asked. Megan nodded. I never needed their recognition. That was true. But sometimes, truth reveals itself not to prove something to strangers, but to remind your own family. A black car waited at the exit. Nothing flashy, just punctual. An old colleague of Megan's had arranged it after seeing the article that morning. We settled into the back seat. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the resort one last time. The wedding continued. Music played. Lights glowed. But I knew that inside Kevin's mind, something had shifted forever. I turned toward my wife. The pearls rested quietly at her neck, catching the last light of sunset. A parent's pride is always tied to a child's success. But if success makes them forget where they came from, life has a way of reminding them. A diamond can lie in mud. It can be misunderstood, undervalued, even thrown away. Its nature does not change. And that night I left my son's wedding, not with anger, but with a calm I hadn't felt in years. Calm because the truth had spoken for itself. without us ever raising our voices. Thank you for sitting with me and listening to this story. If it made you think or reminded you of someone in your own family, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes a small story is enough to change how we see someone's true worth. Silence does not mean insignificance. Some people never step onto the stage, yet they are the ones who write the words for the entire hall. Before judging someone by appearance, maybe we should ask ourselves, have we truly understood their story? I'll see you in the next one.